What is up, podheads? Back with another episode of the Podio Slay podcast. My name is Tony. I am joined by Anthony and Nate. But first, the moment you've all been waiting for, we're just going to rank Rage Against the Machine albums. You guys ready?
Whoa, let's go.
Wait, have we done this? No, we did not.
We've never actually done it. I'll give it to you right now. Evil Empire, self-titled, Battle of LA. We're done. All right, let's move on.
The string quartet to Rage Against the Machine.
I'm not counting Renegades because it's a cover album, which we deep dove on an episode way back when. Go check that out. The audio quality is not great. The conversation's awesome.
Wow, that's a good intro.
Let's go.
I'm good. I'm Anthony. If it's your first episode, I'm Anthony. We got Nate on the ones and twos. Is he a self-titled Rage truther or is he an Evil Empire truther?
Oh, dude, Evil Empire. I'm with you on that one.
There you go. All right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, episode's over.
I think we all already. That's why we've never done that one, right?
It's a wrap. Let's go to sponsor.
I don't know when this episode is going to come out, but behind the scenes, we've had a stretch of like 6 interviews or guests in a row between having Rob on and having Dan on and Brian from Current.
And some others that we haven't recorded yet, so we're not going to say them.
Right. But this is an OG. The gang's all back. Like I said a few weeks ago, or it could have been a month, who knows? You're in our living room. You're part of the conversation. Sit back, relax. An old school OG.
Yeah, it's like a book club. All right, dude. We'll set up a time, come over, pour a drink, and let's geek out on X, Y, and Z.
Except you don't have to pretend that you didn't read the book, because that.
In this case, we've all read the book, or as it were, lived the album rollout, album cycle, live shows. We've listened to it a ton. We're talking about Nine Inch Nails with teeth, because they're a house band, I would imagine at this point. I mean, we've talked about Nails off and on the entirety of the podcast. We've never dedicated, I think, a full episode, but we've dedicated pieces of segments and all that stuff to them. So Trent is one of I think all three of us recognize his genius over the course of 30 plus years of making music.
I don't hold musicians on a pedestal, sorry.
Sorry, just kidding. He's not a genius. He's just like you and me. He puts his pants on one leg at a time.
Almost 200 episodes into this. Yeah, nothing's on a pedestal.
Just a normal dude with normal feelings that does it really well in music form.
We'd have him on the podcast. I think he would test us.
Oh God, yeah. He's a white whale too.
He could mop the floor with us probably intellectually. So he would. I could see him pausing us in our tracks and be like, "Did you research this? What did you?"
And we do research. That's the thing. We don't show up with nothing ready. We're not those guys. Not that we know anybody that does that. We have a lot of friends in the community that do their homework, but we pride ourselves on being kind of ready and, trying to do things our own way and put a spin on stuff. But he would definitely make us work for it.
Yeah, he's a no bullshit. If you've seen or heard any interviews with him, he's definitely a no bullshit. I don't have time for bullshit, wasting time type individual. Very analytical, very, obviously we talked about it earlier, very smart. But yeah, I think we'd kill this interview if we had him on. I think we would do it justice.
Actually, before we get into With Teeth, how would we pitch it to him? What would even be our angle?
That's a great question. We're obviously legacy fans. We've been around the music for the majority of our lives, if not all of it. And been watching MTV. I mean, I remember it would be we've been with you since type of thing. We're not new to the Nine Inch Nails world, but he's done so many. He doesn't do a lot of press, but he's done so many really good interviews when he does do them that it would definitely be one that would make me we have to pull this off, and we have to have an angle that would work.
Well, good. That's the pitch. We're going to send that to him.
Yeah, hopefully that works. So if you like that, hit us up. DMs are open.
Like and subscribe. So yeah, in lieu of not probably ever chatting with him, we're just going to analyze we're going to actually, what are we doing? We're revisiting With Teeth, which came out in 2005. Do we want
2005.
How do we want to do this? Do we want to give our how we remember the album?
Yeah, I think we kind of, similar to any of the other album deep dives we've done, we can maybe give our first reactions to either the announcement or any of the stuff that happened leading up to getting the album.
Yeah, I like that.
I'll lead off. I'm ready.
Let's hear it.
So I remember, and we've talked about our buddy Donnie a handful of times on the podcast. So if you spent any time listening to Podio Slave, you know that we've had a friend, Nate and I for sure, we're spending a ton of time with our buddy Donnie around this time. So late 2004 into 2005. I think, Nate, before you moved to New York or even Florida, I can't even remember. Where were you at that time?
Yeah, I was in Maine. 05, I was in Maine before going to New York City in 07, yeah.
Yeah, but we would hang out a lot, on the weekends with our buddy Donnie, and he was a big Nine Inch Nails fan from his older brother and, himself for a very long time before we even kind of started doing that. And it turned it on to me, who then helped turn it a little bit onto Nate, although he knew about him before. I didn't introduce him to Nails, but I think we deep dove kind of around the same time. And I remember the announcement coming through. There was a snippet of Beside You in Time with like some lights, and it was a video. It was like some lights and a trailer essentially. And you were just like, oh my God, we're getting a new Nails record. And it was, for me, I was really into the band at the time because I've been listening to The Fragile a lot, going back and listening to, Pretty Hate Machine and Downward Spiral, and just really finding my way into the music way more than I probably would have if I was, 15. And we just were so excited. It was, I think at the time, I would venture a guess to say it was the record that I was the most excited for up until that point in my life, just because I was so into the band at the time. So yeah, that was my first holy shit, we're getting a new Nails record, and I'm peaking as a fan of the band. This is amazing.
Well, because think about leading up to that, take Rage Against the Machine. You knew Battle of LA was coming out, but it was because they released a whole single, right? And then they had Rage TV, where this was, I'm guessing, Tone, that was YouTube that you saw that clip.
It might have been, yeah, or the Nails website, but it was early this type of internet.
Yeah, so again, probably one of the first to do that. You know what I mean? Have teasers or trailers, leverage the technology, and you could really build the hype cycle. It was like a sample of the single. You know what I mean? So you haven't even shaped your thoughts yet, but you were still excited.
Yeah, great assessment, and really frames the era, 05. Like you said, I think it was the website, because there was the promotional element for a legacy act like Nine Inch Nails. It was well, they can kind of stand on their own. They don't really need ancillary, MTVs of the world to promote the band. They have a cult following. They always did. And similar to your take, Tone, because of people like Donnie, I think primarily Donnie actually, I got into the band and was again, also peaking in terms of my total fandom for the band, deep dove all the lyrics and all the booklets and the history. This is almost pre-Wikipedia for the most part, just anything I could find on Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails. This band's phenomenal. This guy's an amazing songwriter. Beforehand, it's a classic example of seeing someone in the hallway with a Nine Inch Nails logo t-shirt being I don't know what that is. It looks strange. Maybe I'll check it out someday. But we were a little late to the game, right? So 99 was the Fragile, and we're hoping man, it'd be really cool to see this band come to form again. So with Teeth coming out in 05 in the promotional cycle for this album, it was holy shit, this is our chance. We're a little bit late to the game, but now we get to see it come. So I think it was the website or some kind of teaser snippet video, a 30-second snippet video, and that was just the signs of the times. But similar sentiment and just peaking in terms of total fandom for Nine Inch Nails.
Wow, we all had very similar stories. I didn't have Donnie, but one of my roommates at the time at college, this was sophomore year of college, big NIN head, his favorite band of all time. He was always playing them, and I mean, obviously knew them, knew of the Fragile, Downward Spiral, Pretty Hate Machine, all that stuff, but was not just a casual fan. He got me big into them. And similar to you guys, this was the first Nine Inch Nails album cycle that I was a true fan of. You know what I mean? So you saw it from the start. You saw the teaser. You saw the single, where in the past, I would have been 12, 9 when those albums came out. I would not have appreciated them. So I think it's the first one that I not only was hyped for, but I also appreciated. Okay, so that's leading up to it. Album comes out. What are you guys thinking? I have an initial thought.
Go ahead.
Most accessible Nine Inch Nails album up to that point, especially with because The Hand That Feeds was the lead single, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, that's a pop song,
Yeah,
it really is. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you look back at the previous releases, The Fragile's a double album and is amazing, and one of our favorite records. We've talked about it a ton, but also that's a lot. Like as a fan, you're like, oh, I'm gonna spend some time with this. I have to even like unpack it. I'm not even sure I've unpacked it completely, and I've listened to it a million times 20 some odd years later.
Has Trent unpacked it?
Probably. Yes, I think he did on With Teeth. Funnily enough. But I think, yeah, it's it's slimmer. It's 14 songs, right? And an hour versus 2. So I would agree with that. And you're right. The singles, especially The Hand That Feeds and Only, were very radio rock ready.
Yeah, there's almost like a loop, like a drum loop in the back that makes it accessible. So that's a pretty accurate statement with especially mirroring this to like older stuff, which is like so industrial or gothic or whatever you want to say. Like if you're not in that scene, especially in that time, you had to choose your lane. Sadly, that was just the way it was. But this was like a breakthrough of, okay, this is more of a rock album. And you can see that with, the addition of someone like Dave Grohl on a handful of tracks on this record.
Definitely more digestible, right? 56 minutes, like you said. Fragile, what was it, hour and 40? So like there's a conscious, even with what, there's six years between albums, still a conscious decision to make this, digestible, because there were B-sides. Like, are there known B-sides for this recording cycle?
Yeah. Home, which was later released on... Hey, Trent does a good job of like giving some of that stuff to people. So that one, Non-Entity, there were another version of Right Where It Belongs. I think another version of Every Day is exactly the same. But yeah, there's stuff out there that was like B-side.
So if they wanted to, this could have been another 2-hour special.
Absolutely. He was in a better place. I mean, The Fragile was this kind of long, sprawling, a bunch of different feelings. Trent dealing with a lot, both, in his personal life and with substance abuse stuff, which is chronicled. He's clean writing this, and he had a lot better time doing that. And I think you can kind of hear it in some of the songs. Listening to that today through that lens, stuff made a little more sense to me than maybe it did when I hit it. It hit me the first time at 19 or 20.
Yeah, because was that a narrative like for this album cycle, like Trent's, cleaned up, or because I don't know, like, yeah, was it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Because the news websites were not what they are now. Now it would have been all over Loudwire and Blabbermouth and all that stuff. And sadly, it kind of it shapes what you even think about it before you even hear it. You know what I mean?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was doing some research, and this album originally was supposed to be a concept album with strong correlation to like getting sober. Whereas The Fragile is really in a dark place, I guess, under the influence. This is maybe the flip side to that. And I think he decided against making it a full-on concept album, just based on what I read. He just didn't think that was the right direction for the record. But there's hints of that throughout the songs and the references and whatnot. But it's not like a cohesive concept album in its own right. But the clarity is definitely there. It's just, you can hear it. You can hear it in the sounds. You can hear it in his voice. You can hear it in the writing. But it's funny that I didn't even realize that until I researched it today. You just kind of listen to the songs and understand his emotion and depth, but you don't really relate it to that direct subject matter unless you read like a quote from him, which I did. And he said, yeah, I was going through rehab and I got out of it and put out this piece, and songs started coming to me a lot easier. So it's kind of a beautiful, redemption.
Well, and yeah, it's not something that would be on your radar at our age at the time, right? I mean,
true.
It's cool that we get to live the rollout and the excitement for a record that we all, were in the moment super, super stoked for. And looking back on it today, to have a completely different connotation, or, maybe not completely different, but knowing a lot more than we did at the time, because, 15, 18 years have passed, and you're able to read some stuff and find some things out, and Trent's been open about things, and it's a different experience. That's the best part about fucking doing this. It's like, holy shit, this record is new to me today for a different reason.
Were they when The Hand That Feeds came out, were they the biggest they'd ever been? Because that song was everywhere.
Ooh, I don't know, man. Closer was pretty big.
Okay, yeah. But like, as far as like the casual music fan, I think that song permeated. I mean, I'm not saying it was on like top 40 radio, but I'm thinking if I played that song for my parents, they might have heard it. Well, that's probably the first time I could say that about any Nine Inch Nails song.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. You know, their hit singles from the 90s had like all those things. Like a lot of people know those just in passing, you know, whether it was on MTV or just in the radio, like, oh, I think I heard that somewhere, you know. But in terms of like accessibility, like we were mentioning earlier, I think this record might be something that, like you said, if you could play it for your parents and be like, I recognize this just because of the time, really. Promotional element. Like it's not like all black clothing. It's like, oh, I can dig this.
Yeah. I think to the point of it being accessible, I remember people I was hanging out with at the time, other females, and not typically a band that females get into, but some do. I'm not saying they don't. But the ones I was hanging out with wouldn't have grabbed maybe the Downward Spiral and put it in their CD player. And them knowing Only and like knowing the words to Only, which is kind of wild if you think about it.
Yeah, it permeated. I mean, the hand that feeds, like that could have been given to a more mainstream artist, and it could have been polished and, you know, gone the pop route, and it would have been even a bigger hit than this was. Like, it's, you know, a good song is a good song. A pop artist could knock this over the fence, and it would be probably the biggest song on the planet for that year.
All right, let's talk about the album itself. After hearing it and obviously putting it back through the lens of today, what are some of the songs that stand out for you guys? Like, Nate, what are your like top 3 or top 4 songs that kind of kick into gear every time you want to listen to this record?
Good question. Nine Inch Nails is such a versatile group, or I guess it's really just Trent, but musician. So it touches on like so many different emotions, and the ones that stand out for me are like the full-on in-your-face Nine Inch Nails song. So that the one that fits that mold would be "You Know What You Are." Like right out of the gate, that song just fucking slays. Then, contrary to that, Line Begins to Blur, and it kind of gets you in the zone. That's another Nine Inch Nails flavor of like, okay, I'm in the zone. I feel this. And then I guess for a third track, I put 3 down. Is that kind of ballady Nine Inch Nails song, the closing track, right where it belongs. Like, it might be my favorite Nine Inch Nails song. It's just so deep. Great closer too. But those 3 tracks for me.
You Know What You Are is all time. I like the lead single, right? Hand That Feeds. Every Day Is Exactly the Same, and Line Begins to Blur. Like those, as I listened back in prep for this, I was like, oh yeah, this is why that when this came out, you know, we talked about the hype. After it was out, it lived up to the hype. And then I'm sure we'll talk about seeing them live on this tour pretty soon here. That cemented it for me. You know, we always talk about, you know, you see the songs live as a different flavor. It brings out, well, in some bands, the worst in them, but in this case, it brings out the best.
I think we're all a broken record here. I love the vibe of Every Day Is Exactly the Same. I mean, it's not a happy vibe, but I understand it. I've felt that vibe. We've all felt that vibe where you're just like, that dour kind of, and another day of this. I've done this a million times. I got to do it again today. But I think he's talking about like, I know what's going to happen. I've done this before. I've lived this movie before, and it's, you know, getting clean, getting away from all that is what made it easier for him to digest that. But that song is awesome, and it fits in so many different ways for so many different people. It's one of the best songs I think he's ever done. Right Where It Belongs, great song. The second version, that kind of like quieter, I'll send it to you, Nate. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's a pretty cool version of it. I think I like that one even better. But it's a cool song. I love that it goes to, he's kind of singing and it's a little like lo-fi, and then he gets, he's like live show, and it's like, oh, I'm in front of everybody and now I sound perfect. That's a pretty cool like technical aspect of that song. I love You Know What You Are. The drums on that song fucking rule. That's Grohl at his finest. People, you know, everybody knows that Dave has helped out on this record. He was on 6 tracks, I think. And this is the one that I think he stands out on. So, yeah, those ones are all great.
Every Day Is Exactly the Same was nominated for Grammy. Or maybe did it win? It was nominated for a Grammy. It was nominated in 2007, and I think there was another Grammy nomination. Hand That Feeds, nominated for Best Hard Rock Performance in 2006. So in 2 different years. So that's unique. Always, getting 2 noms is unique, but in different years is unique too.
Yep, true.
Yeah, that is a good point. The nominations, also given the fact that it's a complete departure from like what was happening in music at that time in 05, 06. It's not this style of music at all. It's really pop punk, right? 05, 06. It was still kind of
pop punk and like the Strokes and the Hives and
the bands.
Yeah.
Yeah, because electronic music, like, not that this is EDM, but EDM didn't get love until late 2000s, I feel like.
No, this has got like some synth pop, but some like, darker goth kind of tones, but it's also a hard rock record. The thing about Trent is he can do so many different things, and I think they're kind of all on display on this record, which is why we all like it, is that it hits succinctly for him a bunch of different pieces of what make Nine Inch Nails what they are.
And I think this was, like, critically, it went over pretty well. And I looked back at, different websites like Loudwire and Spin, like they ranked the Nine Inch Nails discography, and this was in the top 3 to 5 Nine Inch Nails releases, which, I don't know, do you guys, like, I feel like there's some that you just can't put this over. Like, it ain't happening. Yeah. So I think that's about right. I think like 4, maybe.
Yeah, 3 or 4. It depends on when you came up with it. I'm a Fragile Guy #1 all day, and then probably Downward Spiral, and then probably this.
Do you write for Loudwire? Is that
what they did?
Well,
thanks, Loudwire.
They had it at 3. Yeah.
Huh.
Did I stump you, Nate?
No, I was thinking it's interchangeable, I think, really. I mean, Downward Spiral and With Teeth kind of, I think we always talk about it, like, depending on the week, where would it sit? And after listening to this record like 4 times today, I'm like, I think this would sit right after the Fragile. And I think it's a perfect progression from the Fragile, really. So another one of those records that could not have come out beforehand. It was supposed to happen in its time. Agreed. And obviously that's a big reference to the fact that he got clean, and there's a lot of references to that. So it makes sense.
You just saw me unmute because I was going to tell you that's why it had to come after, because he got clean. But it fits in his discography where it is. And we talked about concept albums earlier. The next one is a concept album, Year Zero. So it's funny that he had that idea but didn't shake it. He just moved it on to the next thing.
So they released The Fragile in 99. They come back with this album in 2005. So 6 years. I don't know the touring history, but were they actively touring in that stretch? Because the answer to that kind of feeds into a point I'm going to make here in a second. But do you guys know?
Off the top of my head, no. I will look it up. But this record, they had a ton of shows in 05 because of it. And I mean, we saw a bunch of them, and we'll talk about those in a second. But I don't know that there was a ton of touring leading up to this record. I think there was some, but it got kind of blitzed after this was on its way.
Yeah, from my understanding, the Fragility Tour 2.0 ended, and he basically walked away from it, almost like went on hiatus to an extent. Band, writing, everything. I mean, there's some pretty deep quotes of him saying, I was off the deep end. I was just drinking and doing drugs and just really let myself go. And so I think I want to say that there was no shows whatsoever. And that's why I think for us, being so amped that they were coming back, it seemed like this band was done forever. So for them to come back and come back strong, I was like, oh, wow, not only are they back, but I remember when we saw him, like, the guy's in great shape. He looks great. Songs sound great. It was like a rebirth of Nine Inch Nails.
According to Concert Archives, and this is obviously a tad flawed, but 62 shows in 2000 and nothing until 05. So I'm sure there was some less than nothing, but a little bit of a break.
Which makes the rollout, the live rollout, and the return so crazy, because you have the Hand That Feeds, which is maybe the most poppy song they've ever had, but they're playing theaters. We saw them at the Orpheum. They could have played the Garden. It was unique. They almost had like small residencies at these not clubs but theaters.
Well, they played the Garden later that year.
Well, there you go. So it was. I'd love to. That's something we would have to ask him. Like, what was the? It was a choice, right? Because they could have sold out the Garden in 05 after being gone for 6 years. Absolutely.
Well, those shows at the Orpheum, which we talked about on a very early episode back in 2020, like maybe even a single digit episode. I can't even remember, but it was a ways back. And they were like, let's toss these small club shows out, or like, you know, theater shows out, because it's been so long. Like, let's get back out in front of people and see what happens. And I remember seeing those tickets go on sale for the Orpheum shows, which is a tiny little venue in Boston comparatively to the Garden or wherever, and being like, we have to get on this because it's gonna sell the fuck out. And it did, both nights.
Yeah, I think I did read, again, this is recollecting from like those days of researching anything Nine Inch Nails, and reading something that he had said that we've been gone for a while. I don't know where our audience is, given, you know, it's a whole different crowd that came up with Nine Inch Nails. We're like this new crowd in reality. So it's almost like a test market. Like, hey, let's play some theaters. They'll probably sell out because we know we have this base of fans, but can we really do arenas again? I don't know, because that's a big undertaking. And I know for the Fragility tour, he wanted to go all out to, you know, so much that he ended up, you know, digging into his own pockets for the production and whatnot. So for him, it's like such a perfectionist element where it's like, if he's going to do arenas, he really wants it to be 10 out of 10. And if it's going to be a half sold arena, then, well, that's just, you know, it's a loss. So smart. Again, the guy's a genius. So in all sense. So even going the tour rollout is like, okay, if I'm going to do this, it has to be well calculated, and starting in theaters was a kind of a cool move.
I have a confession, guys. So I went to we were all at I think the May 12th date at the Orpheum. Yep. Dresden Dolls opened.
Yep.
But I did something. The first time I ever did something was related to this show, and it was reselling tickets at a markup. So I bought 4 tickets when these things went on sale. And it was a hot ticket. I don't know how soon they sold out, but sold out big time. I think it was like $70 a ticket. Bought 4 of them. My buddy and I went. I sold 2 tickets on eBay and pulled $250 a pop for them. And here's the awkward part. You guys ready for this? I sat next to the couple that bought them, and they asked me. They were like, "Did you buy these tickets on eBay?" And
you said yes.
It was like Jimmy the Dunce. I didn't say anything. I was like, no, I don't know.
Thanks for the free show, bro.
No kidding.
Where were you? Were you down bottom?
I was down bottom under the overhang. So I remember the top part, right? The mezzanine, I think or the balcony goes over.
Yeah. Yep.
We were under the balcony below.
And we talked about this way back, but we were in the balcony, and pieces of the ceiling were falling on us because it was so loud and like raucous in there. Our tickets up top were $38.70 with fees.
Wow.
A $30 ticket, and $1 venue fee. Which, I mean, $1 venue fee today, 18 years later, would probably be a $13 venue fee, which is crazy. But yeah, that's wild, and good for you for making a couple bucks, because
free show.
Free show times 2.
They opened with "You Know What You Are," and I remember just the lights being like, "All right, Sean, that's what I went with." It's now cemented why you love this band, because I think he'd seen them maybe in the late '90s, obviously different setting, but I remember when that kicked in, and you just see a silhouette of Trent. It was. I don't know. I can't even describe it. I was 19 at the time, 20, 19. Nothing like I'd ever seen up to that point, and probably nothing like I'd ever seen at our age now. Like, and probably never will, because are they ever going to play the fucking Orpheum again? Probably not.
No. And this is the time frame when Nine Inch Nails and Trent decided to make the live show a fucking spectacle. Like, he threw everything he could at the live show, as far as like making the lights cool, making the visuals cool, making the DVD, like if you were going to buy the DVD 2 years later, cool, which I did when the Beside You in Time DVD came out. And I was like, this is so cool. Even just like watching this in my fucking room in 2007, being like, oh man, I've seen this concert 4 times, but I don't fucking care because it's awesome even on DVD because no expense was spared and no, creative stone unturned as far as like at that time to make that look that way. So I get why it hit you because it definitely hit me.
Yeah, it's cool, man. There's a simplicity element to it because I remember, like, I know exactly what you're talking about, Twine. It's like almost like a strobe lights that go to the beat of the drums.
Yes,
I remember it
yes.
vividly.
Yep.
But down to the merch, like there's a simple element, like let the music speak for itself. Same with the live production. It's like you don't need like tons of visuals and whatnot. Just have the music and the lighting and some kind of stage presence. And obviously the band's just up there slaying. So it's not over the top, but it's just right. And I can see why there's so much attention to detail that Trent puts into it, down to the logo really, but everything's just perfect band, everything about it. And that show just is a great example of that.
Yeah. And they played like a 19-20 song set, 5 songs from With Teeth. So they leaned heavy like most bands do, obviously promoting a new album. But I think you're right. I think this was like the comedian doing a test market, in the small local club, seeing how it hits. And then, because you said they played the Garden later that year. Like that was the level tour.
That's a show regret, and we've done show regret on this this pod before. But Nate tried like hell to get me to go to see them with Queens of the Stone Age at the fucking the Garden in Boston, and I was like, I can't. It's the first week of college. I got to go to my. I just skipped last night to go to the Red Sox game. I have to go to class tonight. Here I am, wishing I had done that too.
Should have stayed down there.
I went to that show by myself. Drove all the way to the TV Garden.
I wanted to go so bad.
And drove all the way back. Parked my car across the street from the Garden. Walked in as Queens of the Stone Age were walking on stage. So the timing was impeccable. But yeah, dude, the Orpheum to the Garden. We also saw him at the Tweeter Center in Mansfield, Mass. for this tour.
And we saw him in Portland, Maine too.
Yep.
2 days later, we saw him in Tweeter. I have the dates. It was June 21st, 2006 in Portland, Maine, and then June 23rd, 2006 at Tweeter in outside of Boston, just south of Boston. And like vastly different shows because Nate, you and I got all the way to the front at the Civic Center in Portland. Like we were on the stage essentially from the majority of that show, and it was a fucking wild show. And everybody that we know that grew up here, lived here, and went to that concert still talks about how cool that concert was. And then to turn around and see it again, at Tweeter, which is an outdoor Comcast Center, whatever it's called now, outdoor massive amphitheater shed type place. Pretty wild to catch it again there, but I had so much more fun in Portland because we were right up front.
Do you guys, switching it up from the live element, do you think this album is forgotten? Because do you think most Nine Inch Nails fan this probably is not the first album they're going to put on?
It's a good question. I think there's a lot of similarities to Nine Inch Nails and the band Tool. Like I think this was a return to form, but also like a whole new crop of fans. So this is like 10,000 Days for Tool. It's a great fucking record. Is it the first record Tool fans put on? Probably not. It's probably Enema or Lateralis. For Nine Inch Nails, it's probably the Fragile or Downward Spiral. Is it forgotten? I don't think so. But that's a great question. For us, no, right? Because it was literally it was our return. Like, oh fuck, dude, Nine Inch Nails are back.
I don't think it's forgotten. I think it's underrated. Look at the track list. Like, come on.
Well, and putting together my top tracks for this, I gave you 3, but I have 7 of them here. I loved Beside You in Time. I loved The Line Begins to Blur. I love Right Where It Belongs. I love Sunspots. The record's good from front to back. And listening back to it today, thinking to myself, I was not sure how I'd feel about this because it had been a while since I just sat down and listened to it. But I'm still vibing with it the way that I did when I was 21 years old. And now I'm, much older than that. And I see it differently, but I still like it. So, yeah, I think you're probably right. Underrated for sure. Maybe a tad forgotten because of, other things that might get reached for by Nine Inch Nails fans or the general public. But this record's really good. All right, a couple quick factoids and, pieces. The live band has changed a bunch. Atticus Ross helped out, and he's did a bunch of soundtracks with Trent and then joined the band in 2016. And then, they had to find the new band, but a guy that's come up on our podcast a ton, we've never talked to him, we'd love to, played a little bit on this tour and ended up in the band for a hot minute.
Jordy White?
Nope. He was, yes, but not him.
Josh Freese.
Josh Freese. Yep.
Oh, Freese.
Yeah, another through line of a lot of the things we've talked about on this podcast, Josh Freese. Also, mastered in Portland, Maine.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Bob Ludwig?
Yeah, Adam at Gateway. Yep. Under the Bob Ludwig tutelage back in the day. But yeah, Adam Ayan, who's been with them as well. And so many cool records have been mastered in our little neck of the woods, man. I mean, that's... I'd love to go say hey to those guys and be like, you guys have touched so much greatness. It's so cool.
Yeah, I can see it now. We're in the hallways just geeking at it on all the plaques on the wall. Like, oh, wow. Well, did you want to talk? Oh, no, yeah, for sure. Hold on a second.
Well, I know, when I was looking on Wikipedia earlier, I saw Rich Costy's name, who we've kind of tossed him around as a potential guest on the podcast. Just, he's worked with Frank Turner, Muse, and Sigur Rós and all those guys, but it takes a village to pump out albums like this, man.
There are a lot of people behind the scenes that, or not necessarily behind the scenes, but ones that don't get the due that a Trent Reznor gets or whoever, because they're pulled in as a session musician, whether it be live or to play on a record, and they get credits and stuff, but you don't realize it. I mean, we look through. Next time you're bored, find an old classic rock record, look through their Wikipedia, see who played on it or see who toured on it, and you'll be like, wow, there's some names that I didn't realize were there. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good point. And there's just one last thing, because it's, I don't want to say bizarre, but, we kind of poke fun once in a while. But there is another little tidbit that I researched today that Trent attributes Rick Rubin as a huge inspiration and mentor for writing this record, which, we've read some things that Rick Rubin is kind of on the sidelines and lets the creative freedom kind of happen. But I guess there was a real cohesive collaboration between Trent Reznor and Rick Rubin in making this happen. So I thought that was cool to see, because it's just usually the other way around. It's usually like, yeah, he's the producer, I didn't see him much. This is the opposite. It was a very much so like they worked together on everything from the storyline to the, the song direction and everything. So it was something that he called out personally. And I don't think Trent Reznor would have said something like that if it wasn't accurate. So something I wanted to mention.
I'm not sure that Rick was a producer on this. I think he was just when coming up with this stuff, a muse.
Oh, really? Yeah, I read that in Wiki. I was like, huh. No,
so did I, and I think I read it differently than you did.
Well, it just says that producer Rick Rubin, so just in general, was his mentor and source of inspiration throughout the planning and writing process of the album.
All right, what are your memories of this record out there in Podhead land? Did you live it like we did? Were you at shows? Did you check out, one of the club shows? Did you check out one of the amphitheater shows, outdoors, live, all that stuff? Or, is this your first kind of foray into listening to or talking about Nine Inch Nails? We'd love to hear from you. And hey, if you've checked us out at any point and haven't hit us up. The DMs are open. The email is open. It's coming in a second. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from anybody that has checked out the podcast. It's really cool to kind of get some feedback from the people who are listening, and we're so happy that any of you do.
Yeah, I echo that. All this content is brought to you by nerds just like you.
I'm in, you're in, we're all in. I went to a Dresden Dolls show and all I got was this Nine Inch Nails set. See ya.
Me too. Peace.
Cheers.
Coin operated. Peace. Thank you for listening to Podio Slave. We are at Podio Slave on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the places that you can find us on social media. Facebook, Podio Slave Podcast. YouTube, Podio Slave Podcast there. Email us at podioslavepodcast@gmail.com. And hey, if you want to become a supporter, click on the link at the bottom of the episode and give us $1, give us $5. It keeps the lights on, keeps us going. We really appreciate that stuff. Thank you.